The sky was soft that morning, all peach light and cotton clouds. A prairie hush held the village still, like the land was holding its breath. The girl rose early, as she always did, brushing her hair at a window while her two younger sisters snored under a quilt stitched by their mother. Outside, her father split wood, and her mother, apron tied snug at the waist, set biscuits in the oven. It was the kind of quiet joy no one ever thinks to protect until it's gone. They weren't rich. Their house stood at the edge of the village, more dust than paint on its walls. But it was theirs, raised plank by plank over years of sweat and stubborn love. Her father's hands bore scars from fence nails, her mother's from boiling pots and callous prayers. But they laughed often, and that laughter echoed off the porch beams like music the wind learned to carry. She fed the hens and milked the goat. Her sisters woke to the smell of butter and smoke. The youngest chased her around the table with a wooden spoon, squealing, while the middle one practiced reading aloud from a second-hand primer. Their mother hummed a tune from the old country, one no one could name anymore, and her father asked if they wanted to ride into town with him that evening. The girl didn't know it then, but that day would mark the last time she ever saw either of them alive. The storm came sudden, like a curse spoken under breath. First the wind, dry and sharp, smelling of static and far-off fire. Then clouds like bruises rolled low over the hills. Her father saw it coming, and went out to tie down the animals. Her mother followed with her shawl whipping behind her. "Stay inside," she told the girls. "Don't open the door." But the barn groaned under the weight of the wind. Then came the crack, with screaming, then silence. The girl flung the door wide and ran barefoot into the rain, her heart thudding like hooves. Her sisters screamed after her, but she couldn't stop. She found them buried under a collapsed beam, her father's hand still wrapped around the bridle of their best mule. Her mother's eyes were open, sky-reflecting, as if waiting for someone to explain. But there was no one to speak. She didn't cry, not then. She knelt in the mud, touched her mother's brow, and whispered something only the wind heard. Then she stood, trembling, and walked her sisters home. There was no preacher left in the village. Hadn't been for 2 years. So she dug the graves herself, under the old willow tree that bent like a woman in grief. The villagers came out, offered bread and murmured words, but no one stayed long. One man with a silver watch said, "Might be better if you let the girls come with us. You can't manage all this on your own." She looked at him like he'd stepped on her parents' bones. "We're not beggars," she said. "We're theirs." She was 16. At night. She sat awake while her sister slept tangled beside her, listening to the creaks of the house and the distant cry of coyotes. Her father's boots still stood by the door. Her mother's knitting lay undone on the rocking chair. Ghosts moved in the corners, but they didn't scare her. It was a silence that threatened to undo her. Too big, too full of things unsaid. Morning came, and she rose. She had no time to weep. The chickens needed feeding. The goat still bellowed for milking. Life, for all its cruelty, insisted on continuing. So she did. The first weeks were hardest. One of the hens died, and the others stopped laying. A pipe burst and flooded the pantry. The middle sister got sick with fever, and she sat by her bed for 2 nights straight, whispering stories and wiping her brow with cool cloths. She taught the youngest to boil water, the older one to sew rip sleeves. Every chore her mother once did now belonged to her. And the land, oh, the land, seemed to test her. Dust in the well, weeds in the garden, thunder without warning. But she didn't complain. She learned. She grew strong in the arms and hard in the eyes. She found an old ledger in her father's drawer and studied it by candlelight, tracing numbers with a finger until she understood them. She sold what they didn't need, the old buggy, the spare saddles, and bought chicks, built a coop with her sisters. They lost some to a fox one night, but she fixed a gap with wire and nailed the boards tighter. Next came goats, then 2 calves. Bit by bit, they rebuilt something that held. She didn't go to town unless she had to. The stairs made her feel like a broken wagon. Useful, maybe, but not quite right. Still, she held her head up. When folks said, "Poor thing," she said, "I'm not poor. I'm working." Men began to notice her, whispering about the girl with the fire-colored braid and storm-weathered shoulders. Some came calling, always with flattery and gifts. One offered to take her and her sisters to live in his fine house. She thanked him for the offer and shut the door before he could finish the sentence. "This house was built with their hands," she told her sisters. "We're not leaving." As spring warmed the soil and the world remembered how to bloom, she planted a garden of her own, rows of beans, squash, and corn. Her sisters helped, their laughter returning in pieces. She taught them what the land taught her: patience, stubbornness, and how to listen. One night, after the youngest had fallen asleep reading and the middle one had curled up by the stove, the girl stepped out onto the porch. The moon hung like a silver promise. Coyotes howled again, farther off this time. She rocked slowly, her father's coat wrapped around her shoulders, watching the wind ripple through the tall grass. She did not smile, not quite, but her eyes no longer looked like winter. She whispered into the darkness, not expecting an answer. "I'll keep them safe. I'll make it count." Behind her, the house creaked. A soft sound, familiar, alive. The land had taken everything, but she had not broken. She'd stood alone in the storm's aftermath, and she was still standing. The days found rhythm after grief. Not ease, no, never that, but a certain muscle memory took hold. Wake before the sun. Check the coop. Boil water. Feed the goats. Braid the youngest hair, while the older one packed books into a flour sack for school. Chores layered over one another like the planks of a roof, keeping the wind out barely. The girl's name was whispered now, not in pity, but with something like respect. She walked into town once a week. Boots dusted, rifle slung on her back, her chin set like a blade. She didn't gossip, didn't linger. She sold eggs, bought feed, and nodded when spoken to. It made people nervous. Strength in a woman often did. Their land began to respond to her. The soil softened where her hands dug. The goats grew fat. The chickens laid well. By midsummer, she built a second coop with her sisters using salvaged barn wood and rusted nails. Her hands bled, but she wore the scabs like armor. The middle sister, clever, quiet, took to the books with a hunger. The youngest, all laughter and wildness, sang to the animals and drew faces on fence posts. The girl kept them steady, like a shepherd with two lambs too curious for their own good. She rationed flour. She mended boots. She taught them how to shoot, how to trade, how to read a man's eyes before his words. One afternoon, while haggling over seat at the dry goods store, the shopkeep offered a discount if she'd agree to attend Sunday service with his son. She looked him square in the face and said, "I'd rather pay full price with clean conscience." The man turned red, but he said nothing else. Word spread, of course. Everything did, but she didn't flinch. She knew what she'd inherited: land, grief, mouths to feed, and a silence more stubborn than sin. She carried it like she carried the pail of water each morning, without spilling, without complaint. Their little ranch began to look less like a remnant and more like a beginning. Rows of squash climbed their trellis. Beans coiled around the posts like hopeful hands. A neighbor woman, widowed, lonely, gifted them a dying apple tree in a pot. The girl planted it near the fence line, watered it slow, and never told anyone how often she watched it, waiting for green. Some evenings, the three of them sat on the porch. The older sister recited poems in a halting voice, paused to ask about unfamiliar words. The younger one made up stories about the stars, how they were once campfires lit by lost travelers, or the eyes of old coyotes guarding dreams. The girl mostly listened, her gaze far, her heart quieter than it used to be. But not everyone celebrated their survival. There were men who passed too slow by the fence, who looked too long at the barn, the goats, the tidy rows of vegetables. Men who saw not a family, but a prize unguarded. One of them came knocking near dusk. He wore a pressed vest and had hands too clean for any real work. Said he'd been watching her from town. Said she was doing real fine for a girl. Offered to buy the land. Offered to take the girls in and give them a lady's life. Promised everything but respect. She stood in the doorway, fingers resting on the edge of the door like they might close without warning. "You're here too late," she said, "and talking to the wrong woman." He smiled, but there was no kindness in it. You got no man to protect you. Her jaw tightened. No man needed. You're still on my porch, ain't you? And not inside. He left eventually, dust rising behind his boots. But something lingered after, something bitter in the air, like the smell of the storm too far to hear, yet too close to ignore. That night, she oiled her father's rifle, made sure the shells were dry, locked the doors, though she never had before. Her sisters noticed but didn't ask. They'd learned to read her silences like scripture. Still, the danger did not come. Instead came the season of labor. Harvest, slaughter, firewood stacked like bricks for winter. The girl's hands grew rougher, her shoulders broader. She could lift a feed sack without staggering now, could break a rabbit's neck without flinching. But sometimes in the dark, when her sisters dreamed aloud of dances and summer fairs, she let herself wonder what she'd traded to keep them fed. Men still came sniffing, some with charm, some with schemes, none with what she needed, until one showed up not with words, but work. He came during a windstorm, helping herd scattered goats back through a broken fence without being asked. Didn't offer a name, just tipped his hat, nodded to the smallest sister, and fixed the post he leaned on. Then he left. His horse was lean, his face shaded, skin like dust and copper. The next week, he returned with a saddlebag full of sweet potatoes and a book of medicinal herbs. Said nothing unless spoken to. Her sisters called him the quiet man. She didn't call him anything, but she watched him. He knew soil, knew the way of roots and stones, taught the older sister how to identify a sick goat by its eyes, shared a sal recipe for the cracked skin on her knuckles. He never lingered, never stepped past the porch unless invited. There was caution in him, same as in her, maybe recognition. Still, she didn't trust easily. And the shadow of that suitor, his slick smile, his veiled threat, remained in the corners of her mind, waiting. But there were nights now when she let her sisters speak of hope again, of dresses, of birthdays, of how the apple tree had sprouted its first stubborn leaf. The girl didn't smile, but she watched the stars and didn't feel quite so alone beneath them. She knew peace was not permanent, that the world had a way of circling back with claws. But she also knew how to stand, how to aim, how to endure. She just didn't yet know how to hope. Not fully. Not yet. The man came and went like weather, never staying too long, never speaking more than needed. He'd show up with some scrap of help, mending a trough, easing a sick calf's cough, fixing a hinge without being asked. The girl noticed the care he took with animals, how he'd murmur to them in a language she didn't know, gentle as dusk. He didn't smile much, and when he did, it never reached his eyes. Still, there was nothing oily in him, no flattery, no weight behind his gaze when he looked at her. He moved like someone used to not being seen. Half Comanche, half something else. He wore his heritage like armor, not pride. The town kept their distance. Some called him half savage behind his back. Others simply turned their heads. But the girl had no use for cowards who whispered. She watched him work, and when he asked to trade 4 pounds of goat cheese for a bushel of beans, she said yes with a nod. Her sisters liked him. The older one called him a mystery with hands. The younger drew a picture of him on the back of a feed sack. Sharp jaw, long braid, one boot scuffed worse than the other. When she held up with a grin, the girl said nothing, but her eyes lingered on the sketch longer than she meant to. Still, she kept her heart behind the fence as tightly woven as the one around their land. She didn't know what he wanted, and trust was not something she gave lightly, especially not now. Then came the letter. It was slipped under their door one morning, written in a practiced hand that tried to hide cruelty beneath politeness. The same suitor she'd once turned away, smooth-talking, land-hungry, unaccustomed to hearing no, had written to extend a final offer. He wrote that their land might soon change hands anyway, as new claims were being filed by men with deeper pockets and sharper lawyers. He wrote that it would be better, safer, if she accepted his help now, before someone else came to take it by force. The girl read it twice, then folded it neatly and slid it into the stove. The flames ate the words, but not the warning. That week, she doubled her patrol of the fence line. sharpened the axe, showed the older sister how to load the shotgun, and made the younger one memorize where to hide if trouble came. Her sleep grew lighter, her voice tighter. She didn't speak of the letter. She didn't need to. The man in the braid noticed. One evening, he rode up slow, eyes scanning the hills like he'd heard something too. She met him at the gate, her sleeves rolled and hands dirty from fixing a post. "Someone sniffing around," he said quietly. "More than sniffing," she replied. He didn't ask for details. Just looked toward the barn, then back at her. "I could keep watch a few nights, just till it passes." She narrowed her eyes, measuring the offer. "What do you want in return?" His face didn't change. "Nothing. Not everything has a price." She studied him, waiting for some flicker of deception, but found none. And so, for the first time, she said yes. He slept under the stars with his rifle across his chest, back against the barn. The younger sister brought him cornbread. The older one asked him about his time in the army, and he told her about cold nights and worse mornings, about leaving orders behind because they didn't sit right in his gut. He told her he fought, then walked away from the people who called it victory. The girl said little, but she listened from the porch as he spoke, low into the night. On the third morning, they found the fence cut near the western edge. Boot prints, deep and deliberate. Not the kind of mistake coyotes made. No livestock was taken, but the message was clear. This place was being watched. She crouched in the dirt beside the prints, her jaw clenched. The man stood beside her, silent. The sun hadn't yet cleared the horizon, and mist clung to the fields like ghosts unsure of their direction. "They're waiting for me to blink," she muttered. "You won't," he said, as though stating the weather. She looked at him then, really looked, scar under one eye, fingers calloused in familiar ways. A quiet that didn't come from fear, but from choosing stillness over noise. She didn't know what that meant yet, but she didn't look away. That night, she sat beside him on the barn's awning, shotgun resting across her lap. The goats stirred in their pen, restless under a too-quiet sky. He handed her coffee boiled over fire, bitter but warm. "I didn't ask your name," she said finally. He shrugged. Didn't offer it either. She waited. He blew on the tin cup, then said, "Call me what you want, but the army used to call me Shade." She snorted. "Fitting. I didn't choose it. It stuck." "Most names do," she said. Her eyes drifted toward the tree line. "Storm's coming. I don't know when, but it's coming." Shade nodded. "I'll be here." They didn't say more. They didn't have to. The moon climbed higher, casting silver on the fields. Somewhere far off, a dog barked once, then stopped. The barn creaked with memory. The girl glanced back at the house, where two sisters slept, trusting that she'd keep the world outside where it belonged. She turned to Shade and asked, not softly, "Can I trust you?" He didn't answer with words. He just reached down and unbuckled a rifle at his hip, laying it gently across his knees. His eyes stayed on the horizon. She took that as enough. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was filled with choices not yet made, and wounds not yet named. Still, there was something in it, something not unlike hope. For the first time in a long while, the girl felt that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't the only one still fighting to keep something sacred alive. The knock came just before sundown. Not a frantic pounding, but a rhythm too polite to be friendly. The girl opened the door slowly, her hand already resting on the rifle's grip, and found the suitor standing there again. Same pressed vest, same curled mustache, same eyes that looked at her like she was livestock too stubborn to sell. "Evening," he said, tipping his hat. She didn't respond. He smiled like someone who hadn't heard no often enough. "I came to say this is your last chance." Behind her, the younger sister peeked from the stairs, then ducked away. The older one sat stiff at the table, not reading now, just listening. "You think if you plant enough beans and scowl hard enough, you'll keep what you've got," he said, shifting his weight on the porch. "But the land doesn't care about your pride, and the laws never favored a girl with calloused hands." She stepped out and closed the door behind her. "Say what you came to say and get off my porch." He laughed once, low. "I'll come back tomorrow with paper. Deed transfer." I'll give you fair price. But if you're still playing Ranch Queen come morning, then I reckon you'll learn the hard way how things go." She didn't move, just watched him walk away, his boots kicking up dry dust, his words lingering like smoke after a fire. That night, Shade didn't leave the barn. He paced instead, slow and quiet. The girl met him there near midnight, rifle over her shoulder. The air felt thick, like something was building. She said nothing, just passed him a jar of water. Their hands brushed. Neither flinched. "Tomorrow," she said, "he's coming with papers. Or worse." Shade nodded. "He won't come alone." "I know." He looked at her, the moon catching his profile. "You want to run?" She scoffed. "That land out there? My mother's blood is in that soil. My father's bones under the willow. I don't run." He didn't smile, but he didn't need to. "Then I stay." Morning came sharp and dry. Wind skimmed the grass in nervous gusts. The younger sister helped nail the shutters closed. The older one packed a basket of food, though her hands shook. Shade took up post at the barn again, rifle across his lap. The girl stood in front of the house, shotgun held easy but ready, boots planted like roots. They came just after noon. 5 men on horseback. The suitor rode in front, papers tucked into his jacket and a revolver on his hip that hadn't seen real use in years. The others flanked him, hired men, hard faces, eyes like stone. They fanned out as they approached, cutting off escape. But the girl had never intended to flee. "Let's keep this civil," the suitor said, dismounting. "You sign, you leave. No one gets hurt." She didn't answer. Shade stepped from the barn shadow, rifle raised and steady. That alone made 2 of the men shift uneasily. "This land isn't for sale," she said, her voice flat. The suitor sighed, shook his head like a disappointed teacher. "You could have been smart." Then everything snapped. One of the hired men reached for his gun, and Shade fired first, clean, sharp, fast. The man dropped before he cleared leather. Chaos followed. Gunfire cracked. Horses screamed. Dust kicked up around boots and hooves. The younger sister screamed from inside the house. The older one threw herself over her. The girl stood firm. She fired once, then again, reloading with quick, practiced hands. She hit a man in the leg. He screamed, dropped his weapon. Another fled, panic overriding his pay. The suitor crouched behind his horse. Shouting orders, no one followed. Shade moved like smoke, weaving between fence posts and shadows, drawing fire away from a house. One man grazed aside, but he didn't stop. The girl tracked movement, aimed carefully, breathing like she was back in the storm that took her parents. Then the suitor rose. He aimed right at her, and the girl fired first. His gun fell from limp fingers. He staggered. Blood bloomed across his shoulder, dark and wide. He fell back, not dead, but done. Silence settled like dust after thunder. 3 men lay moaning in the dirt. 2 were already gone. The rest had fled. Shade limped back to the porch, rifle lowered. The girl walked to the suitor where he writhed on the ground, clutching his wound. She stood over him. "You thought I'd beg," she said. "You thought I'd fold like laundry. But I don't run. I plant. I fight. And I keep what's mine." He didn't answer, just looked up at her with something almost like fear. She turned and walked away. Later, after the wounded were taken to town, after the sheriff came and listened to Shade's account, after witnesses confirmed the suitor drew first, after the law finally agreed that no man had the right to scare a woman off her own land, peace returned, but not the same as before. This peace had teeth. Shade stayed, not as a guest, but as something more permanent. He didn't ask. She didn't either. They simply began working side by side, fixing the fence, rotating crops, teaching the youngest to ride, teaching the oldest how to negotiate better at the general store. They never married with vows and paper, but the girl wore his coat sometimes, and he cooked supper twice a week. The girls called him uncle. The house filled again, not with laughter, not always, but with the sound of something real being built. The apple tree bore fruit for the first time that spring. Small, bitter apples, but apples nonetheless. The girl picked one, wiped it on her sleeve, and took a bite. Shade raised a brow at her reaction. She nodded. Could be sweeter. He smiled just barely. Give it time. One night, sitting by the fire, the younger sister asleep beside her, the older one writing in a leather-bound book, the girl spoke softly, not looking up. I thought the storm that took them was the end. Shade didn't answer right away. He was mending a broken bit of bridle. When he did speak, it was quiet. Sometimes storms clear the land. She met his gaze then. For once, she didn't look away. The prairie outside was dark, but the wind was soft and the fences stood firm. And the girl, no longer just a girl, sat with her family, her land, her story, still standing, still hers.